Yeah, we're not going to pray just yet, but I know that it's camp. I know how camp works, and I know that some of you have strategically placed yourself in just the right seat, hoping that the speaker would have you grab the hand of the person beside you, so that was your chance. And guys, if she's still holding on, then congratulations. But if not, maybe later on, some speaker will let you do that. So I took my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, to see Jurassic World last week. How many of you have seen this movie? I'm not going to give you many spoilers. I mean, mild spoiler alert, there are dinosaurs. Mild spoiler alert, some people get eaten by dinosaurs. But my daughter I hear her sniffling. And I'm like, is she allergic to popcorn? Is she sick? I'm like, her name's Daisy. I said, Daisy, are you okay? She's like, yeah. She's crying. I'm like, what? Why are you crying? I'm cracking up, by the way. Anytime somebody gets eaten, I laugh out loud. And I said, why are you crying? And I've learned there's several kinds of people that will go to Jurassic Park. If your youth group went or you went with a group of people, you know these people. They're probably in this room. First of all, there's a girl, I'm sure, that's crying. I still don't know what there is really to cry about in the movie. Really mild spoiler alert, really mild, very tiny mild. A dinosaur breaks a teenager's cell phone, which is enough to make most teen girls go into full hysterical bawling. And I'm like, honey, it's not a real phone, okay? It's not even a real dinosaur. It's going to be okay. Well, then there's the kid that watches the movie who says things like, that gyrosphere they're riding in, we can't do that. They don't have those. This is so unbelievable. And I'm like, but these genetically mutated dinosaurs really had you going, didn't they? You were fooled by that? Then there's the kid who sits and watches the movie and is somehow the youth group's self-declared paleontologist, who knows everything about dinosaurs. I'm not exactly sure how. And he's the whole movie's like, nope, wouldn't make that sound. Nope, wouldn't look like that. Nope, velociraptors we know had feathers, which apparently, I've done some research, we do think that, because we all remember from the first movie, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the only Jurassic Park movie there really is or should be, that dinosaurs probably had feathers. And spoiler alert, not about the movie, but about your campus, I'm pretty sure you've got a velociraptor statue right outside this door. I am pretty sure. I don't know what a chaparral is. I'm not sure what that is. But from now on, in my mind, you will forever be the LCU Velociraptors. Because that thing out there scared me to death. Second only to when I was praying backstage. This is a true story. And another spoiler alert if you're going to pray backstage. I go backstage, it's kind of dark, I'm praying, I'm listening to the worship, it's awesome. I bow my head, I look up, and I'm not kidding, there is a full-size Easter Island statue back there behind the screen. I did not know that until I look up from the prayer, and I am staring face to face at the statue. I just about yelled things that you would have heard from the other side of that screen, and somebody else might have had to speak tonight. There we go. But anytime you share with a group of students, a bar is set pretty high. I know that you had a great message last night. You're going to have some great messages, but I may have shared this with some of you before, but I want to share with you the bar for me. This is my goal. This is my goal. I realize you're not younger students, but this is my goal. Some of you may have heard me tell the story before of there's a weatherman that went to visit a little classroom. And you know how weathermen from news stations would go and they'll visit, right, elementary classrooms, and they'll do a little weather presentation. And then the teacher has you write thank you letters to the weatherman. I have investigated this. This is real. This is actual. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my clicker to work. We're going to see if we can make it work. I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to read the letter that little Flint wrote to Mr. Raymond. This is his letter, and it goes like this. Dear Mr. Raymond, thank you for coming to our school and teaching us about weather. Someday, when I become supreme ultra lord of the universe, I will not make you a slave. You will live in my 200-story castle where unicorn servants will feed you donuts off their horns. Hold on. No, it gets better. I will personally make you a throne that is half platinum and half solid gold and jewel encrusted. Thank you again for teaching us about meteorology. You're more awesome than a monkey wearing a tuxedo made out of bacon, riding a cyborg unicorn with a lightsaber for the horn on the tip of a space shuttle, closing in on Mars while engulfed in flames. And in case you didn't know, that's pretty dang sweet. Yeah. Sincerely, Flint. I just want to meet Flint. This kid, I don't know what's going on, but that's the bar. So anytime I speak for somebody, I'm like, there's no way I could ever impress anybody the way that Mr. Raymond impressed Flint. I will have to confess that I fell for something a couple of months ago at an airport. I go to the airport and somebody had put this on the paper towel dispenser. As a joke, they printed these off. It looked legitimate. They didn't scrawl it or scratch it. It was just written on there. And I'm pretty sure I looked like an idiot saying, paper towel, please. Paper towel, please. It didn't work. So I got the idea from somebody else. Don't do this. I'll probably get in trouble. But I wanted to print off a whole bunch of these. And go to the airport and just stick them everywhere. Just put one over here, put one on the wall, put them around. And everybody laughs because you know how hilariously frustrating it would be to watch somebody, because especially this generation, man, it is hilarious. My daughter and I, we play a game called, at the mall when my wife and other girls are shopping, we play a game called Dead Battery Bingo. And the way that works is the first person to spot a teen who is about to go into heart palpitations because their battery is dying on their phone is the winner. And Lila Mae, my youngest daughter, she'll try to spot. And so I want to put these in the mall just because when a teen sees this, it really is like Dorothy seeing the Emerald City. And they start running for it in slow motion, only to be heartbroken when they get there. Now, I show this picture, one, to make us laugh a little bit, but also this is kind of like that. If you've ever been in a place where I've been teaching, it's a phrase that I use, it's a phrase that I borrowed from Jesus, because the phrase that he most commonly spoke, the phrase most often used by Jesus was the phrase, the kingdom of God is like. And then he would compare it to something else. Can you imagine how hilarious it would be to get outlet stickers and go put them everywhere? And we all laugh and go, oh yeah, I so want to do that. It'd be so funny. And somebody pauses and then we think, why would it be so funny? Because they think that they're about to hook into a source of power, but when they get there, there's nothing really there. It's not real. It's just surface deep. That just gives the illusion of power and strength and source, but there's nothing there. And we all laugh until we realize that this room could very well be filled with outlet stickers if we're not careful. I don't mean on the walls, but I mean in the seats, and I certainly mean on the stage. There have been times in my life where as a minister, I'm probably as useful to the teens that I minister to back in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I've been as useful to them as an outlet sticker on a wall at an airport placed by some hilariously evil-minded person who just wants to watch somebody else suffer. And so tonight, as we jump in, I want to caution us to not be like a sticker on a wall that offers no help to anybody, because I can guarantee you at some point this week, somebody is going to come into your life that needs you, and they're going to want to access a source of power that they maybe hope or think that you have because they don't have it. And they have come to encounter, as the president just suggested, that they might have an encounter with something greater than themselves, and they may not know about God yet, and so they're going to start with you. And if you're just an outlet sticker on a wall, then you're not going to be of any use to them. And so we go to the Psalm of Ascents that Josh mentioned earlier. We're going to start with Psalm 120, and then we'll get to Psalm 121. Psalm 120 is one of the first of 15 Psalms of Ascents. Ascents meaning like ascending or walking. There's a couple of reasons why they may be called the Psalm of Ascents. And as I've researched this, there really are some conflicting views, and it could be that all three of them are true. Many said these were the psalms that the Jews would sing on their way to the three festivals in Jerusalem. And because they literally had to go up, because Jerusalem was a higher elevation, they would call these the Psalm of Ascents. And as they would go, they would sing them. Think about it like this. It's the go-to campfire songbook that when you sit down around the campfire at camp, you know you're going to sing certain songs. And these were their favorite songs. This was the ultimate playlist for the Jewish people. So if you've got a playlist on your iPod that you go to in times when you really need to focus. Now, some of you would be willing to play those songs for us, and others of you wouldn't. But think about that playlist. This is the playlist. This would be their campfire songs. I'm pretty sure if you look up the Psalm of Ascents in the Message translation, that it mentions things like Pharaoh, and the hippopotamus and things like that. These would have been their VBS songs. And some of these songs are sad and serious, and some of them are celebratory. But this is the first one. Now, there's another view that the Psalm of Ascents are the 15 psalms that the priest would quote on the way up to the temple. 15 steps to the temple, and they would stand on one and quote the psalm. Then they would step to the next, and they would quote the psalm. There's a third view that says these are the songs that they sang when they came out of their exile from Babylon. They had been in slavery, and now they are returning, and these are the songs they sang as they returned. All three could be true, and all three work. So it's probably a yes, 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 rather than an either or. But for our purposes, these are the songs that would take them to a higher level with each passing psalm. Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. It doesn't take long to read. I would suggest that by this time tomorrow night, you find a quiet time and you read all of the Psalms of Ascent. Start in Psalm 120. Write notes. Insert your own words. There's words that we don't use in these Psalms that you could use. But let's start with Psalm 120, shall we? This echoes, I think, what Josh talked about last night. As I understand, he talked about the story of Job. This ties in, right? And he might have referenced this psalm even. I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, Lord, from the lying lips and from the deceitful tongues. What will he do to you, and what more besides, you deceitful tongue? He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom bush. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshech, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Now you say, this has nothing to do with a sophomore in 2015. Maybe not. But I want you to notice there's a couple of place names in there that I wasn't very familiar with geographically. I'm 44 years old, never run across these places, so I had to do what anybody in this room could have done. I looked them up. I have friends that have actually been to some of these places, and I asked them some questions about it, and they said, well, these places are not geographically close, so it's not like he's saying, I live here, because it's not like, Dallas, Fort Worth. It's not like two cities that are close. It's like you've got Meshech is up in the north, and then Kedar is in the south. One of them is far north of Israel, one's far south, but both of them had evil people, cultures that were completely pagan and were completely opposed to God. So ignore the names of the places for a second, but I want you to look at verse 6. Would you all say those words with me? Let's say them together right now. Go. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. That's where I want us to start tonight. The psalmist starts these Psalm of Ascents, whether they're returning from slavery, whether they're going to a celebration, whether they're driving in the van on the way to encounter, and then the van breaks down, so they sing some more songs, and it breaks down again, and they sing more songs. Whether you're on a way to somewhere or on the way from somewhere, you're singing these songs. This is the first one, and the psalmist says, too long have I lived among those who hate peace. So students, tonight I challenge you, how would you finish that sentence? Everybody in the room could stand up, and in your small groups, I didn't send these ahead of time, but group leaders, if you're making a mental note or want to jot this in your phone, here's a great one. How would you, as a student, as a counselor, as an adult, how would you finish this sentence? Too long have I, and then finish the sentence, fill in the blank. Too long have I. What is it? I got the coolest conversation. I was in the line over at the calf for dinner, and I met a young man who's a senior. And most people say, hey, what are you doing here? Or what's your name? Or where are you from? And we had all those exchanges. But his question, and he's in the room here somewhere, and it was really cool, and you really blessed me with this conversation. His question to me was, so you're speaking tonight? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, it's cool. So what got you into ministry? Because I know that you're not going to have time to share that over there. You don't have time to do that. But what was it that got you into ministry? My guess is this young man may be asking that question because he's gathering input because God may be laying that on his heart. I don't know if that's the case. I thought it was a great question. And I'll give you the short answer to the question because apparently when he said, most speakers don't have time to share that, that may be the very thing that you need to hear. It's not because God came to me in a burning bush and said, wow, you're gifted, you're going to speak one day. It's not that at all. It's more along the lines of when I grew up in a church and was active in a youth group, had a small youth group, and things went well, and I behaved pretty much all through high school. Went to college and decided, I can be who I want to be. I've pretty much earned the right to do some things that maybe I didn't do in high school. And a lot of the things I said I would never do, I didn't do, and I never have done. But there were other things that the temptations of the world got in the way, and there's some things that I gave into. And I remember a moment in my life where I said in Psalm 120, I cry out to you in my distress, God, hear me. And I reached a point where I said, verse 6, too long have I lived, and then I filled in the blank. And I remember praying on a mission trip to Miami in 1994. I prayed on the beaches of Miami, God, if you will allow me to feel forgiven, I will give my life to you in ministry, and I will serve you for as long as I'm effective, because I do not feel like you have any use for me after what I have done. I don't have time to tell you the whole rest of that story. Maybe another time. But it was as if a burning bush experience. I didn't hear God's voice, but enough things happened that let me know that God heard that prayer in a very specific way. And that's why I'm standing before you. And so to the young man that asked that question, you blessed me by reminding me that I'm not here because I'm a speaker. I'm here because I'm somebody who is forgiven by God and was able to say, too long have I lived among those who, and you fill in the blank. How would you finish that sentence? Because young people, I know that some of you are sold out to be in here, and I know that some of you don't want to be here, but until you reach a place where you can answer that question, and you can come to the realization that I can't live like this anymore, this has got to stop, then you're not ready to ascend. You can't take the second step. This is the first of the Psalm of Ascent. It's the first step. When I was a kid, my parents got a microscope for me for Christmas one year. It was probably one of the nerdier gifts. My friends were getting all kinds of cool sports equipment and Ataris and things like this. And I wanted a microscope. And I got a microscope. And I would put common objects under that microscope. And then I would I didn't have the technology then to take pictures of them. But what I would love to have done is and what I often would do is to call people over and say, okay, I'd cover up the slide. I'd say, now look down here. When they looked, I'd uncover the slide. I'd say, look and tell me what you think this is. And most people could not tell. They were all common objects. For example, this is the end of the side of a postage stamp. Or I have several here that we're just going to kind of zip through because I think it's cool to look at zoomed in microscopic images of things. This is toilet paper. Makes you never want to use it again. This is what split ends look like. Yeah, now I've lost the attention of almost all the girls in this room for the rest of the time. This, in case you're wondering, is not something from the Muppet or from a Star Wars universe. It's a maggot. There you go. Yeah. This right here that looks like a moon rock is a single coffee ground. Or this that looks like some awesome kid cereal is just salt and pepper. You put it under a microscope, that which you see every single day seems to make no sense. This is the face of a strawberry, the surface of a strawberry. This was one of my favorite things to put under a microscope. It's a vinyl record album. That's where the needle goes, and that's how we make awesome music. Move forward a little bit. That right there is the surface of a CD. It's what it looks like under an electron microscope. This looks like a picture of the Grand Canyon, when in reality it is just the surface of rusty steel. Also sounds like a really cool country music name. Now we get into some of those that I would love to catch insects around our house. I'd put them under the microscope. This is the eye of a tarantula. I never really caught a tarantula at our house. That would have been really fun. This right here is the eyes of a mosquito. Yeah, how cool is that? Here we have the eye of a butterfly. And then here we have butterfly eggs. You keep zooming in on things, and this right here is eyelash hairs growing from the surface of human skin. That's pretty frightening. If you see, that's why, girls, you should never let guys get close to you, because you don't want to get that close to you because they're going to see that image. Then you've got this here. This right here is a football jersey. Or we zoom in on this. Anybody have any idea what this might be? Very good. Some of you have seen it. It's Velcro. This is one of the coolest because it looks like the drawer in my house that you open up and there's all kinds of rubber bands, all kind of stuff. This is a picture of dust on the surface of a desk blown up under an electron microscope. Okay, let's get gross again. This is used dental floss. Not exactly sure what that person was eating, but it's disgusting. This is really cool. Some of you know what this is. This is under an electron microscope, a snowflake or snow crystals. And then this one here is one of the coolest. I would not have had the power to put this under my microscope as a kid. But this is a really awesome picture of a human embryo at 6 days old under an electron microscope. Now, the reason I show these images are because my guess is, even without a microscope, some of you are doing this right now, you're living this right now, something is going on in your life, and you are looking at it like this, as though it were under an electron microscope, and it is so close to you, and it is so right there, and it's so in your life, that you are so scared or so intimidated, you have no idea what to make of it. And I would suggest that you follow the words of the psalmist who says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Let me pause for a minute. I've got a friend who is an ophthalmologist, or he's an optometrist actually. And an optometrist would say that when you read up close for a long time, it can really hurt your eyes. And so he says the easiest way to rest the eyes from reading for long periods of time is to just stop for a minute and to look up and to focus on something far away in the future, or in the distance, not in the future. We'll get to that in just a minute. Look at, you're like, whoa, wow, what kind of ophthalmologist do you see? His name is Dr. Emmett Brown, and he lives... Sorry, that was not planned. I didn't mean to say in the future. But he said, look at something in the distance and focus on something in the distance, and that will rest your eyes. It'll rejuvenate your eyes. It will allow your eyes to be refreshed. My optometrist is also a deacon at my church. He teaches our 9th graders every Sunday, and he said, so by the way, you can see how in Psalm 121, I was like, I'm speaking on Psalm 121 this week. And he says, you can see how in Psalm 121, when the psalmist says, I lift up my eyes, it's as though he says, I can't deal with all this stuff, insert your own word, that is in front of my life. I can't deal with it, and so I have to lift up my eyes, and when I focus, bless you, on something that is in the distance, or in this case, something in the future, then it will allow my soul to be refreshed and rejuvenated. This is the second of the Psalm of Ascent. So the first step is kind of saying, God, I know you've had enough, and I've had enough. No longer will I live in the land of those who hate peace. It may not be the 2 cities that I mentioned, those words, insert your own places, but some of you know what it's like to live there. So let's look at what he says. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Why does he look at the mountains? Because any city in this day would have been fortified by having mountains around it. It's a natural barrier and defense. But he says, my help does not come from the mountains. Even though we sing the song, as the mountains surround Jerusalem, God, you surround me. Now I want you to see what happens here. Would you look at what the next words I've highlighted? It says, he won't let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Let's go on. There's only 8 sentences. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The Lord will not harm you by day, nor the moon. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. But the Lord will, you say those next words, will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. In 8 sentences, 5 times, God says, if you will lift up your eyes, what you will see is not the junk, the crud that is in front of you. What you will see is me watching over you. That's the second of the Psalm of Ascents. It's the second step. We did a game with our youth ministry years ago where I would video with a video camera and I would zoom in on something with a digital zoom. This is when digital cameras were still pretty brand new. It was like 10 years ago. And I would zoom in on something really, really closely, and I would record it, and I would slowly zoom out. We played a game where the teens would watch the video, and when they knew what it was, they would hit the buzzer and say, I know what it is. I'd freeze the video, and they would guess. If they got it wrong, their team was out for that round. If they got it right, they won a point. I would zoom in on things like the handle of a water fountain, or a light switch, or the bottom of a light bulb. Things that people saw every day, but when they looked at them so closely, it was confusing. They couldn't make sense of them. But when they zoomed out and they focused, they were like, oh, that's an outlet. Oh, that's the end of an electrical cord. Oh, that's the top of the fire extinguisher in the youth room. They would know what things were. because they were common objects that they saw every single day, but when they were so up close, they could not make sense of them. Students, this is kind of like that. Jesus would play that game, and then he would say, notice how things so up close are confusing? That's because for some of you, the situation in your home is so close to you can't make sense of it. The situation with your friends is so close you can't make sense of it. The problems with a guy or a girl that you're dating are so close to you, you can't make sense of it. Other people can. And they may or may not point it out to you. And if they point it out to you, you may or may not listen. But he says things are so close to you. The psalmist says, God, I am surrounded by evil and deceit. And he says, lift up your eyes and focus on something in the distance or focus on something in the future. And you will realize that I am watching over you. I know some of you were with us maybe at Winterfest in Arlington, and this is one short story that I'm going to share that you may have heard there, but I think it fits perfectly here. This is a picture of ex-Phillies pitcher Roy Halladay. He was retired from baseball now, and he played with several teams, but most widely known for being a pitcher with the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm a big baseball fan, and I love meeting some of my baseball heroes, and I've got a baseball with autographs from a lot of my favorite players on it. Well, this is a picture that appeared on Roy Halladay's Twitter account, which I found amusing, and I investigated some of the story. This picture comes straight from his Twitter feed. It says, oops, you missed me. Walked right by me. Hope he gets to see his pic with me on Twitter. He doesn't know we took this. I have no idea if somebody knew it. Surely, I can't find the answer to this question, but surely somebody saw that picture. They said, hey, that's my friend. And they said, hey, dude, you were right there standing next to Roy Halladay. You're wearing his jersey. And the guy's like, I had no idea. Why? Because he was looking at a roller coaster. He's like, was the roller coaster more exciting than Roy? He goes, I didn't know he was right there. Again, Jesus would say this is kind of like that. Encounter is awesome. I know I've only had one encounter with Encounter back in 2012. I was here for one night. I'm here for one night now. But I sat over here during the worship, and it was so awesome to watch you all worship. And you all, I mean, you're zoned in. Even on the first night or second night of this event, you're zoned in. But if you're not careful, Encounter can become an amusement park. And all the things that you do can be roller coasters. And you can focus on Encounter and you can miss the presence of the very one whose name is on our jersey standing right beside you. Don't let that happen. Lift up your eyes. Don't be so enamored with the roller coasters of the world. It may not be all the junk that's in your face that's blinding you. It might be all of the amusements that are around us. And so don't be enamored by those things and miss the very presence of the one whose name we wear. This is kind of like that. Paul would say it this way, I keep asking that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you may, what? Or translated, so that you may know that He is standing right next to you. Don't go home from Encounter and say, oh man, I don't know where God is. He was with you the entire time you were there. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which He has called you, the riches of His glorious inheritance in His holy people, and His incomparably great power for those of us who believe. He says, I pray that you may lift up your eyes. All right, I put this up, and some of you immediately go, oh, I love those. And some of you, I remember those, and some of you are like, I hate those. Take that picture off the screen. Because some of us aren't really good at these. How many of you have never been able to see these? Raise your hand. You're like, I don't think they're real. I think it's a joke. The whole world is playing on us. And I know you're frustrated when people say, no, it's real simple. Just hold it really close to your face. You're like, I know how it works. I don't need instructions. They go, hold it close to your face. But you know, they say, and the way that finally helped me, because I couldn't see them for like a year when they first came out or when I first was exposed to them back in the early 90s, when I first encountered a book like this. I couldn't see them. And I remember to this day, the very first time I saw a giraffe in a picture. And I was holding, they said, no, hold it close to your face, but focus on something out there. I'm like, well, how do I do that? I got this picture right in front of my face. They said, focus on something out there, and now put this picture in front of your face. But stay focused on that, and then slowly pull it away, and all of a sudden, a giraffe. And I was like, please tell me it is a giraffe. And they were like, yes, it is. And I knew, had it been a velociraptor, it might have been scary. But I was like, this is really awesome. And so some of us can't see these pictures. I want us to think about 3D for just a minute. When I was a kid, this was one of my favorite toys. I realized, yeah, I'm glad to hear that you all applauded for a Viewmaster, because most people are like, what is that? Does it have batteries? Where do you plug it in? How many gigabytes are in that thing? It required nothing. All you had to do was have the slide, the Viewmaster, and what else did you have to have? Okay, apparently you all named like 80 things. You all had to have a whole lot more than I did. You had to have, I'd love to have heard all those answers, because I'm sure they were amusing. You had to have a light source. And you had to hold it up to the light, and you had to look at it, and the Viewmaster slides look like this. How many of you had Viewmasters as a kid? Raise your hand. All right. I mean, I've got some old Viewmaster deals, all right? I've got one from the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I've got a Viewmaster of Adventureland from Disney World. And then I'm not ashamed to admit that some of my favorites were the ones with superheroes. I'm a little ashamed to admit that my favorite hero was Aquaman, but that's another story. And for somehow, Aquaman is running behind. He's like, Wonder Woman is faster than Aquaman? I don't think so. All right, and so then, let's see if I can get this to advance here. Well, hold on a second. Justin, I may have frozen this up there. There you go. Hopefully I'll regain control of it. Yeah, and this was one of my favorites. I love the old 1960s Batman. That was a good Viewmaster. Justin, you may need to pull that thing out and reboot that, because it's going to be a problem if I can't go back to this, but it appears as though something has happened to it. And we'll try to get that to work. If not, then you're going to have to take over, and that's going to be an adventure for both of us. So there we go. So if you go to Disney World and you go to the Toy Story Mania ride, you'll see a large Viewmaster reel, and my daughter was like, what's that? And I'm like, somebody's going to report me to Human Services that my daughter doesn't know what a Viewmaster is. I've not educated her properly enough. You go on Pinterest, or so I'm told, I've never done it. You go on Pinterest and somebody has made these large picture frames where you put your own pictures. And I thought that was kind of cool. I want one of those. And so you've got the Viewmaster. Now, the way the Viewmaster works is very, very simple. They just take a picture of something from one perspective, a picture from the other perspective, and then when you look at the image, it shows you the image from one perspective and the image from another, because there's two slides with slightly different pictures, and then it just puts it together. Your eyes put it together the same way it does when I look at you or when you look at an object, and it puts it together in 3D. There's more scientific ways to explain it, but it takes these pictures, and that's how 3D movies work. Essentially, we just have a couple of different images, and you'll see sometimes it's like a red image and a blue image, at least in the older 3Ds, and when you look at them through the glasses, then it puts those images together, because one side of the 3D glasses blocks out all of the blue light, one side blocks out all the red light, and so you get two different images that come in, and your brain kind of tricks itself into saying, I'm looking at something that is right in front of me. A Viewmaster kind of takes the image and puts it out in front of your eyes and separates it out by about this much. So this isn't a science lesson, but that's kind of how that works. And it's going to become important in just a minute. Because there is somebody in the Bible who really needed to understand what it meant to lift up his eyes. And it was the prophet Jeremiah. These are three different artist renderings of what the weeping prophet might have looked like. Jeremiah, by the way, is probably one of my favorite books of the Bible. When Jeremiah starts his ministry, he's probably 18 or 19 years old, the age of some of the senior guys in the room or senior girls. He's 18 or 19 years old. His ministry extends for close to 40 years, and hardly anybody ever listens to him. Nobody ever listens to his messages. And as a youth minister for the past 19 years, I kind of know what that feels like. But yet nobody has ever in one of my teen gatherings, stood up and threatened to kill me if I continue to preach the things that I preached. They've fallen asleep, they've texted, they've gotten on and played Candy Crush on their phone, but they've never stood up and they say, hey, Skid, if you keep talking like that, we're going to take you out. And that's exactly what they did to the prophet Jeremiah. Well, let me see here. I'm going to try to get through this, Justin. I don't know if I'm clicking too fast or not. Go ahead one more if you can for me, Justin. Jeremiah's call takes place in Jeremiah 1. The word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. He says, Jeremiah, I saw you when you were an embryo, 6 days old. I didn't need an electron microscope. I know exactly what you look like. I put you there. I know who you were. He then goes on to say, Jeremiah says, Sovereign Lord, I don't know how to speak. I am only a child. But the Lord said to me, don't say I am only a child. It's got to be embarrassing when the very thing you just said to God, God says, by the way, don't say that to me. He's like, well, sorry, you should have told me that before I said it, and I wouldn't have said it. He says to Jeremiah, you must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and I will rescue you, declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand. He touched my mouth and he said, now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I have appointed you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy, to overthrow, to build and to plant. To the young man that I met in the food line at the calf, I would love to have said that was how it happened, that God came to me and said, I have appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That's not exactly how it happened, but that's how Jeremiah was called. And then I want to continue to hear the question that God asked. I think if I stand over here, it works a little bit better. There we go. Then the word of the Lord came to me. What do you see, Jeremiah? He says to this 19-year-old, he says, lift up your eyes. Look around and tell me what it is that you see. Jeremiah looks around. And when he looks, go ahead, Justin. Thank you for your help back there. He says, I see the branch of an almond tree, I replied. Strange question. Jeremiah looks and he sees an almond tree. An almond tree would have been the very first thing that bloomed in the springtime. It would have been, after all the plants had died, it was the first thing that comes back to life. There's significance to that. This is kind of like that. Also, you remember that one of the things in the Ark of the Covenant is Aaron's staff that was blossoming with almond buds. There's something significant about this almond branch. Go ahead, Justin. The Lord said, you have seen correctly, for I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. Now, this is one of those things that I'm like, I don't understand. What does an almond branch have to do with this? Here's something that's kind of neat. The words, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, I'm not a language person, but I have learned that the word shached, which means almond tree, sounds a whole lot like the word shoched, which is the word that means I am watching. So he says, Jeremiah, when you lift up your eyes, I want you to see, and remember the psalmist in the Psalm of Ascents, 5 times in 8 sentences, God says, I'm watching, I've got this, I know. The psalmist says, God, you have no idea, where are you? And he says, I see it, I see all of it, I know that it's there, I'm in control. He says, these two words sound so much alike. There's what we looked at in just a minute from Psalm 121. He says, I am watching. In Jeremiah, every spring, when the plants begin to resurrect and you see an almond tree, I want you to know that I am watching. And then he says this, get yourself ready. 19-year-old Jeremiah, get yourself ready. 19-year-old encounter student, boy or girl who's about to go off to school, to college, get yourself ready. Stand up and say to them whatever I command you. Do not be terrified by them, or I will terrify you before them. Today I have made you a fortified city, an iron pillar, a bronze wall to stand against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, and the people of the land. They will fight against you, but they will not overcome you, for I am with you and I will rescue you. Just like the song we sang earlier. He says, I am watching, declares the Lord. And so God comes to you tonight and he asks you that very simple question as he challenges you to lift up your eyes. Go ahead, Justin. He says, what do you see? Because if you see something so close to you that it makes no sense and it's very intimidating, he says, then just take a moment, lift up your eyes, step back, zoom out and focus, and you're going to see that I am watching you. Go ahead, Justin. It'd be cool if we had what some guy wants to develop, sunglasses that are like the Instagram filters. You pick your own filter that you love because apparently a picture is not good enough unless you put a filter over it and make it look actually older than it really is. And so imagine if we had glasses that allowed us to see the world through all of the Instagram filters, and Jesus would again say, this is kind of like that. I want you to take a moment and just look at this image for just a moment. I see somebody back there. Tell me what you're doing. Why are you standing up? It tells you to stand up? Why are you the only person standing up in the whole room? Do what? Why can you see it? How'd you get those glasses? Riker, I want you to walk up here and come join me for just a second. I don't know Riker, we met earlier, but I will tell you that other than me giving him these glasses and telling him, when you see an image that looks like this, I said, I just want you to look through these glasses, hold them up, Riker, that I will give you, and I just want you to look through the red lens, and that's all I'm going to tell you. And he says, what do I do? And I said, you will know what to do when you follow the instructions I've just given you. And he says, well, is it going to be clear? I said, you will know what to do when you follow the instructions that I give you. I didn't tell him what it was going to say, and I showed him a picture of this on my phone, but it looked just like this. It was as clear to him then as it was to you. And I gave him the glasses. Riker, hop on up here for just a second. Riker and I just met, and so we didn't rehearse this, but we did set it up. I had to give him the glasses, and I said, sit somewhere out there. But I want everybody for just a moment to know what it looks like when you stand up in the middle of a bunch of people who are sitting down, or even worse, this is kind of like that. What it must look like when somebody stands up to somebody who is bowing. Everybody else is bowing down to another God. This right here is, maybe Justin, if in just a minute, there you go. Maybe if you unplug that again, it'll reboot it. But this is what Riker saw when you looked at the picture. Because I told him to just block out the one filter, the blue filter, and just look through the red filter. And when he did that, that is what he saw. He's the only person in the room that could understand those instructions, and he did what it was I told him to do. Jeremiah says, you'll know what to do when you follow the instructions that I give you. I asked Josh to pick me a student. I said, just pick a student out. I had no idea that he would probably be the one person in the room who looked the most like a biblical prophet. I didn't practice that, and when I saw Josh, I was like, Josh, I needed to volunteer. I didn't need Jesus, so this is great. This is great news. So Riker stands up, and Riker, even though I knew what was going to happen, it's still a cool moment to watch all these people sitting here and to watch you stand up in the midst, because you're the only person in the whole room that can see that. Even though you knew that it was safe and you knew this was a safe place, it still felt probably a little weird to stand up in the middle of a talk and to have people sitting around you going like, dude, what are you doing? Riker, sit down. Like, hey, Jeremiah, down in the back, we can't see. And so you're standing up, and then I love how you answered the question. I said, what are you doing? I'm doing what it says. And everybody else is like, how does he know what it says? What is up with him? Maybe he's the guy that can see into the future. And it's a pretty simple message when you look through the right filter. There's an app that you can get on your phone. I think it's free. It was when I got it a couple years ago. It's called Hide and See. Some of you probably seen it. Some of us that are older had little board games that had this technology. We had a $25,000 pyramid game show board game that you would like put a filter over it, and you could see the answers when you put a little red filter over it. Some of the adults will remember games like that, and that's how it works. You type in a secret, and then, let's see, there you go. You'll type in a message, and after you type in the message, then your phone will become the filter. You can actually turn your phone into a red filter and aim it at the screen, or you can send it to somebody. They can then have the app with the filter. It's kind of complicated, but you guys can figure it out. You're smarter than that than I am. And then you can begin to read the messages. Your phone will become the filter. But you have to have the filter. He's the only person in this room that understood exactly what that message said. He's the only person in the room that could have answered the question, what do you see? And so, Riker, would you turn around and would you use that message? And nice and loud, since you don't have a microphone, would you tell us what this says, nice and loud?
Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
How many did y'all hear him? He's the only person that can read that. This is what it looked like as he looked through the glasses. That's what he just saw. Clear, it's very clear. But because most of us are in a world with, like the two cities mentioned by the psalmist, where we are among people who do not know peace, some of us are losing the ability to read the message. And even if we can read it, some of us are losing the desire or the willingness to stand up because we know nobody else can read it, and we know that it's not going to make sense when we stand up. Riker, if you can just either have a seat, like, you can sit on the stage if you want. I just don't want you to feel like you got to awkwardly stand up here. This picture hangs in my office, and it's obviously a picture of Jesus. But if you get a little closer to it, it is an artist. Her name is Sandra, I think it's Sandra Jelinek, back in 1974, wrote out the entire Gospel of John and put emphasis on certain letters of certain words so that when you stand back from a distance, you can begin to see things take shape. And when you stand back far enough, you see the image of Jesus. But if you get up close, that's the only time that you realize it is, in fact, the entire 21 chapters of the Gospel of John. The argument would be, or the metaphor would be, that if you begin to live the Gospel of John, you will become to look like Jesus. You'll take on the shape of Jesus. So if I show you a picture that looks like this, and Justin, for the next few pictures, I'm going to let you scroll through. Just kind of watch my hand and I'll point, and you just kind of scroll through, and then we'll come back to this in a second. We don't have to question what is sold here. What are we going to get when we go here? All right, we know. Let's look at the next one. If we know that we go here, even if it doesn't say that it's the donut hole, we know that we're going to get donuts here. Let's go to the next one. If we go to this place, we know that we're going to get things that are what? That are round? Yes, they are round. But we know that we're going to get orange juice or orange flavored products here. If you go to this, round, I like that. I've never had that answer before. That's going to be the person that you can convince that that's a velociraptor out there out there. If you go here, you're going to get what? Nobody has hoods. Nobody has. I'm going to go back to Tennessee and they're going to go, what were the people in Texas like? Well, Tennessee's off the hook for a while. All right. Let's keep going. If we go to this place, we're not going to get spaghetti. We know that we're going to get frozen custard or we're going to get ice cream. It's pretty obvious. I'm going to answer my own questions now because I've given up asking you. All right, let's see the next one. If we go here, we know, even if we don't see the name, we're going to get chicken because it looks like a chicken, which reminds me of this church that also looks like a chicken. But that's beside the point. I digress. We move on. If we go here, this is a building that we know is a library, or at least there are books inside because of what we see on the outside. This is one of the world's largest McDonald's, and it is shaped like what it sells, poisonous, obesity-inducing food. This is not a large bulldozer. It is an office building that rents heavy equipment, but it is shaped like what it sells. Now you're beginning to get the idea. This is one of my favorites. Yeah. It's the traveling Pop-Tart cart. Or then we have this one, which is the Longaberger basket headquarters that is shaped like a basket. Students, make sure you hear this. If you live long enough by the filter that God gives you to see the world, and you obey what that filter tells you to do, even when you're the only one that can see it, eventually you will become shaped like what you sell. And the world will know, if I go to that person, I'm going to get Jesus. You don't go to a place shaped like an ice cream cone and order spaghetti. You're just not going to, you might. Some folks might. But you're not going to do that. And so, Riker, if you'll come stand back up here. Riker represents a prophet. A prophet, by the way, is not somebody who tells the truth about the future. They do that. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share with you, and we're about to wrap up, this may be the most important thing that you hear me say. A prophet, and there are prophets in this room, they are not so much people that tell the truth about the future, but they are people that tell the truth about the present. And you can be a 19-year-old prophet. And you better listen to your 30, 40, 50, 60, 80-year-old prophets. You can be a 13-year-old prophet. Eugene Peterson gives the best definition. Riker, when you put those glasses on and you look through that filter, you become this for everybody in this room. A prophet wakes us up from our selfishness so that we can see the stunning drama that is our lives. And then they push us onto the stage to play our parts, whether we think we are ready or not. A prophet angers us by rejecting our excuses and ripping off our disguises and then dragging our heartless attitudes and our selfish motives out into the open where everyone sees them for what they are. And so, students, if you have ever been confronted by a prophet, back up a second. Somebody has probably come to you in your life and has pointed out something in your life that was not right. It happened to me in college. Before that mission trip, a friend of mine said, "You can't live like this any longer." Until I took that first step, the Psalm of Ascents that says, I will no longer live here. I've got to take one step. Even if it's one, I've got to take one step up. Some of you know what that's like to be confronted by somebody who loves you. All of us know what it's like to be confronted by somebody who just wants to put you in your place and point out sin so that they feel better about their own sin. We all know what that feels like. But students, how many of you can honestly say that somebody in your life has cared enough to come to you and has pointed something out in your life because they cared about you? Are you willing to be honest and just raise your hand and say, that's happened to me? I'm not raising my hand to show you how to raise a hand. I'm trying to lead the way and say, this is, not all of us have had that. That's okay, but this is, and it was painful for me. If that hasn't happened to you, there's one of 4 reasons why. Number 1, you're perfect, and we know that's not the answer. So let's move on to number 2. You are still young and innocent, and that could be the case. If we had middle school students here, it would definitely be the case that there are some that just haven't really made choices. I mean, they've sinned and they've done bad things, but they haven't really found themselves in a place of outright rebellion. And they're like, I just don't know, and nobody's confronted me. I've never done anything really wrong. You may still be young and innocent, or someone has confronted you, but you did not listen. And the next slide is going to be painful. But I've worked with students for 19 years, and I'm convinced that this is the fundamental problem with every generation, not just yours. If you can say, nobody's ever confronted me, it could be reason number 4, which is you've surrounded yourself with people who don't recognize that you're breaking the heart of God. Because all the people around you are just outlet stickers. They're on the surface. There's no power behind them. So, some of you, like Riker, or Riker may be this in life, I don't know, but at least tonight, he is representing what it means to be a prophet in this world. 1 Peter 2, dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish men. But the first thing you got to do is lift your eyes. Justin, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you right here. I want you to maybe blank the screen. I want you to go back to where you see the other images like I showed Riker. I want to skip that part. We'll save that for another day. But if you can go into the presentation and just go to the slide, there's a couple of slides later where there's another coded message. If you can go and find that, maybe, or you can, yeah, there you go. Okay, I can see it. There you go. Just keep going until you find it. And I want to end with this, Riker. This is what I'm going to have you do. Riker, in just a minute, we're going to show some other images on this screen. I want you to stand down there among your peers. Just hop down on the floor there. I just want you to stand among your peers. And I want you in just a minute to say very, very loudly what the message says, because I will tell you they're not going to be able to see it. Thank you. Let's go back one. Thank you, Justin. The world sees this, and it makes no sense. But God comes to you, the prophet Jeremiah, and he says to Riker, to Jeremiah, insert your name. He says, I'm going to give you a message, and I want you to stand up among the people. I want you to lift up your eyes, and I want you to do what it says. And you're like, I can't speak, I'm only a child. And he says, I'm with you. I am watching. What do you see? He says, I see an almond tree. Every time you see an almond tree, know that I'm with you. And he says, Riker, what does it say?
See others through the Jesus filter.
Turn out that way and say it louder.
See others through the Jesus filter.
Or turn it that way and say the same exact volume. That'll work too. He says, see others through the Jesus filter. Let me see the glasses for a second. Encounter is a moment where God gives you these and He says, if you can't make sense of it, then let me give you a filter and learn to see the people beside you, the people in your group that you don't like, the people in your school that make fun of you, the people in your own home who've turned their backs on you. See them through the Jesus filter. You're going to need that as we wrap this up. What does it say? What does this one say? Say it nice and loud, Riker, because you're the prophet. You're the only prophet. You're the only voice that can speak for me because you're the only person that knows what this says. What does it say?
See the church through the Jesus filter.
Now say it again louder out that way.
See the church through the Jesus filter.
That's what it says. Very good. Yep. There we go. See the church through the Jesus filter. Some of us complain so much about our churches, and God would say, hey, wait a minute, I've appointed you as a prophet. You go back and you see them through the Jesus filter. One more. Would you look at this? And what does this one say?
See yourself through the Jesus filter.
See yourself through the Jesus filter. Riker, I'm going to take these. You can go back and have a seat. Thank Riker for helping out. Hey, for some of you, you're like, Skid, I can't do it. I can't do it. If I were sitting out there and I looked and saw that it said to stand up, I can't do it if I'm the only one. I can't do it. And God says, I'm watching. I'm watching over you. My prayer is that you have an encounter, but it starts by saying the first psalm of ascent. I can no longer live where I am. I can no longer stay here. You take that second step, and that second one says, I will lift up my eyes. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Justin, one last help. If you'll go to slide 150, and we'll finish there. Number 150, just click that. The last two images I'll show you is this. This is under an electron microscope, and this is a pinch of sand taken off of the beach and put under an electron microscope. This is what every single grain of sand looks different and looks like this. And you're like, I had no idea. I had no idea it looked like that. Sometimes things up close don't make sense until you zoom back, and sometimes things far away don't make sense until you zoom in. And I love this image. Under an electron microscope, you take some sand, and God, who says, I love you more than the sand of all of every beach on the world. Why are the beaches even there? It may be as an object lesson to say, that's how much I love you. And if you zoom in, you're going to see this awesome image that God says, I have taken and I have shown you my love for you that looks so much like a heart. And He says, just get close enough to me. Sometimes you got to zoom out and focus. But He says, if you lift up your eyes, what you're going to see when you look through the filter of Scripture, you're going to see that I'm watching and I love you. In a moment, we're going to sing a song, and some of you may just say, you know what, I'm not ready to give my life to Jesus. I don't know, but some of you in the room are going to say, I'm ready to at least take the first step up the Psalm of Ascents. I'm going to take the first step up the temple, and I'm going to say that first line that I'm no longer content to stay where I am. It may not mean that it ends with baptism for you this week. You may not be ready for that. But please, students, don't leave here tonight content to stay where you are. Lift up your eyes. Where does my help come from? Not the mountains, but it comes from the one who formed you. And He set you apart as a prophet for the nations. So that when you see through the Jesus filter that you're to stand up, I pray that you'll answer that call. I'll close with a simple prayer, and then we have some people that will be up here that will just pray. If you just say, I just want help taking that first step, they'll do that. It's been an honor to be with you. I'll hang out a little bit on the square and visit with some of you. I know you've got some more activities tonight, and I appreciate your patience. Will you pray? God, it is not within my power to place the divine teachings of God directly onto the heart of another person. All I can do is lay them on the surface of the heart so that when the heart breaks, they are the first to fall in. And to the extent that that has happened in any way tonight, may you receive all the glory. Through Jesus, we lift our eyes and we say together, amen. Let's stand together and let's sing.